Hey there, Kipsters. Mr. Piazza here, and we are looking at objectives 1A.1 through 4. That's adding and subtracting integers. So there's really three skills that we need to review here, even though there's only adding and subtracting. And the first is, how do you add integers when they have the same sign? So that's adding numbers such as -4 plus -3. Two numbers that have both the same sign of a negative number. In order to add numbers with the same sign, first, you're going to add the numbers, ignoring the signs. Second, you're going to keep the sign the same. So if they're both positive, the sum is positive. If they're both negative, the sum is negative. So let me do some examples. First example, 12 plus 5. One that you could probably do in your head, but the point here is 12 is positive, 5 is positive. So since we're adding integers with the same sign, you add the numbers. 12 plus 5 is 17. And you keep the sign. Since both the numbers are positive, the sum is positive. And that equals positive 17. Second example, I have two negatives. -12 now, plus -5. The steps are the same. First, add the numbers. 12 plus 5 is 17. And now keep the sign. Since they're both negative, the sum is now -17. Let's try one more before I ask you to complete two more. I see -4 plus -3. They have the same sign, so I need to add the numbers. 4 plus 3 is 7. Next, I need to keep the sign. Since they're both negatives, -4 plus -3 is -7. I'd like you to stop the video here and please try these two problems. Press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, you tried D and E, so now it's time to check your answers. You need to add the numbers 6 plus 11, which is 17, since they're both negatives. You keep the sign. You should have had -17 as your first answer. Give yourself a check on your paper if you had that. E, you had -9 plus -12. Since they have the same sign, you just add the numbers. 9 plus 12 is 21. Since they're both negative, your sum should have been -21. Give yourself a check if you had that. So that's our first skill, is adding integers when they have the same sign. Now we're going to look at what you do when you add integers with different signs. So that could, for example, would be adding something like -4 plus 3. The rules are going to be different since 1 is a negative and 1 secretly is a positive. And so in order to add integers with different signs, the first step is to subtract the absolute value of the numbers. So you kind of ignore the negative sign for a second, you subtract them. The second step is to keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. So let me show you what I mean. First example, 12 plus -5. I have two numbers with different signs. The first one's positive, the second one's negative. My first step is to subtract the absolute value of the numbers. So the absolute value of 12 is 12. The absolute value of -5, let me use my absolute value signs. The absolute value of -5 is just 5. So I just need to subtract the numbers. 12 minus 5 equals 7, and I've subtracted the absolute value of the numbers. Next step is to keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. Since 12 has a larger absolute value, I'm going to keep the sign of 12. And since 12 was positive, my answer is also going to be positive. And 12 plus -5 is positive 7. To give you another way to think about it, if I did this with chips and I had 12 positives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 5 negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there'd be several zero pairs that would cancel out. But the thing that would be left over would be 7 positives. Another way to show the same answer. Let me show you one more example. B, I have -12 plus 5. So this time you can see it's the same numbers, but this time I have negative bigger than the positive. So the steps are still the same. My first step, subtract the absolute value of the numbers. The absolute value of -12 is 12. The absolute value of 5 is 5, so 12 minus 5 equals 7, just like last time. But now, keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. The number with the larger absolute value, again, is 12. And since 12 was a negative, my sum is going to be a negative. And so this time, my answer is negative 7. And if you're thinking about it again with chips, you'd have, again, 12 and 5, but this time you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 negatives, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positives. Several of these would cancel out, and you'd be left with 7 negatives. So another way to show the same answer. Okay, I'd like you to stop the video here, try these 3 problems, press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, you've tried C, D, and E. Now it's time to check your answer. For C, you have 2 numbers with different signs, so you needed to subtract their absolute value. That's 4 minus 3, which equals 1. And then you needed to keep the sign of the bigger number, which is a negative. So your answer should have been negative 1. D, you had 6 plus negative 11. Since they have different signs, you should have subtracted them. Just to keep it easy, you put that larger number first, so there's no negatives. You have 11 minus 6, which equals 5. Then you need to keep the sign of the bigger number, which was a negative. So your answer should have been negative 5. Last, you had 9 plus negative 12, 2 numbers with different signs, and since you're adding them, you need to subtract their absolute values, which was 12 minus 9. That equals 3. And then keep the sign of the bigger number, which again was negative. So at this point, we reviewed 2 skills on how you would add integers first with same signs and now with different signs. And now we should be ready to move on to the last piece of this, which is how do you subtract integers. In order to subtract integers, we're basically going to do one additional step to turn it into an addition problem, and then it becomes the same as slide 1 or slide 2. So the steps to add or subtract integers are, first, change a subtraction to addition, so we will kill subtraction. Second, add integers using rules from slides 1 and 2. So, first example, I have 7 minus negative 5. I want to subtract these integers, so the first thing I'm going to do is change subtraction to addition by killing subtraction. In order to kill subtraction, you change the subtraction to addition, so now it's 7 plus, and you change the sign of the second number. Since it's a negative 5, now it's a positive 5. And now it's just really 7 plus 5, which I know equals 12. Another example, I have negative 12 minus 5. Again, I'm going to change the subtraction to addition. And I'm going to change the sign of the second number. This time, since 5 is positive, now it becomes negative 5. And so I'll rewrite the problem as negative 12 plus negative 5. I have 2 negatives, so I'm going to add the numbers and keep the sign. Negative 12 plus negative 5 is 17, and since they're both negative, my answer is negative 17. I'd like you to stop the video here, and now you try, remembering that the first step is to kill the subtraction, and then to find the sum after you've turned it into an addition problem. Press stop here, press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, you've tried D, C, D, and E. Now it's time to check your answer. First, I'm going to show you how you should have killed subtraction. This should have been negative 4 plus positive 3, and D should have been negative 6 plus negative 11, and then E should have been 12 plus negative 22. So a good habit is to make sure always rewriting them. Negative 4 plus 3, negative 6 plus negative 11, and 12 plus negative 22. And then you just have addition problems from slides 1 and 2 that you should be able to add. Negative 4 plus 3, you subtract the numbers, which would be 1. The bigger sign is a negative, so it should have been negative 1. Negative 6 plus negative 11, they have the same sign, so you add them. That's 17. Since they are both negative, it becomes negative 17. And 12 plus negative 22, since they're different, you subtract them. The difference is 10. And since the bigger number is a negative, your answer is negative 10. So at this point, we reviewed how do you add integers with the same signs, add integers with different signs, and subtract integers by turning it into an addition problem. Now it's time for some independent practice. I'd like you to try these 10 as your independent practice. This is the first set. After you've submitted these 10 online, you should be ready to retake objective assessment 1A.1 through 4. If you need additional practice, in about 30 seconds I will show part B for more independent practice if you need it. Good luck. Here comes part B.